You're about to watch what we call an extended clip of the Young Turks, and the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. It's a little longer than our YouTube clips, but it's actually shorter than the whole 2-hour show, which you can get if you're a member. You can get it ad-free, and make sure you catch every news story we do that day. You're gonna love it as a full show. That's at tytnetwork.com/join.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Anna Kasparian. Cenk is not here, but he will be here later for Rebel headquarters and the post game. In the meantime, we have incredible people on this panel. J.R. Jackson, Mark Thompson, what up?
What's up?
What up, kids? This is great. JR's got his Captain America mug.
I'm here to protect and to save America.
Oh, wow.
America needs some saving, so
One
that's
drink
good.
of water at a time.
Yeah, you came to the right place.
All right, in the second hour, Brett Ehrlich will be joining in, and he will be leading the show, which I'm looking forward to. And we have a breaking news story, which we will get to in the second segment of this hour. Elizabeth Warren has proposed some legislation that I absolutely love. I have a feeling that you'll love it as well, and we'll give you the details on that when we come back from our first break. But with that said, I do want to give you some other announcements. First off, let's keep it real. We have an Android app. We started off with an iOS app, and then you good people responded with, what's up with an Android app? And so we delivered on that, and I'm really happy we did because, look, I don't like tooting the TYT horn, okay? In fact, I've been pretty critical of TYT when Cenk is on the air announcing things and bragging about things. I love the TYT app. I actually use the TYT app all the time. I listen to the damage report. I watch No Filter just to make sure, quality control, make sure it's looking good.
It's right here.
Yeah.
Mr. Samsung, which I am, it's awesome. It's a beautiful thing.
Wow.
I was actually really jealous when everyone had it at first on their iPhones, which probably needed 15 to 20 updates every 5 minutes. So from those folks, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now I get to have mine. At least my phone won't break after 6 months or need a new one.
You're the worst.
That's
Although you're actually right about the non-stop software updates for Apple products. Okay.
I have the app. Just one last thing, Anna, before you begin. I also have the soundboard, the TYT soundboard.
Do
Is that
you?
an official? I don't know if that's an official thing or not, but I love it. So I have both the TYT app and the soundboard.
Yeah,
so.
you guys should totally check it out. And then if you are interested in checking it out, go to tyt.com/app, APP, and you'll get more information on that. Also, if you have access to iTunes, please download my show, No Filter. We put a lot of work behind it, and I want the show to perform well, to reflect the hard work. So please, if you do have access to iTunes, check it out. It is for free. The audio version is for free. And the name of the show is #NoFilter with Anna Kasparian.
I just would add, I have a podcast that I put almost no work into, but I'd still like people to check it out.
Are you on our network or are you independent?
Not yet. Cenk mentioned he wanted to carry it, but so I'm still waiting. So until then, it's edge-show.com. They're all shaking their heads. It'll never happen. I'll never be on the network. All right, well, whatever. It's called The Edge with Mark Thompson. You can just Google search it.
And last plug, I don't have one.
You don't have anything?
Okay. Enough with the plugs. Let's get to the news of the day. The Trump administration has officially revoked the security clearance of John Brennan. He is the former CIA director. And this appears to be a retaliatory move by the Trump administration. Sarah Huckabee Sanders explained why during a press conference. Let's hear from her.
I'd like to begin by reading a statement from the president. As the head of the executive branch and commander-in-chief, I have a unique constitutional responsibility to protect the nation's classified information, including by controlling access to it. Today, in fulfilling that responsibility, I've decided to revoke the security clearance of John Brennan, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. As part of this review, I am evaluating action with respect to the following individuals: James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr.
So Sarah Huckabee Sanders also mentioned, as you can see from that statement, a number of people who the Trump administration will consider revoking security clearance for. Now, some might wonder, well, why do these people need security clearance if they're no longer serving the roles that they were previously in? For instance, CIA director John Brennan clearly isn't the CIA director anymore. Well, sometimes what happens is there might be some sort of investigation, some sort of issue that the CIA would want a former director's expertise on. So that's one example of why that person would maintain security clearance. Another example would be, doing work as a consultant because you have extensive knowledge as a former director of the CIA, for instance. So there are uses for having security clearance, even if they're not serving in the CIA or some other intelligence organization. But look, the heart of this matter is not national security. We all know that. What this is all about is retaliating against people that Donald Trump does not like. And Trump mentioned Brennan's erratic behavior. Really? Brennan's the one with erratic behavior? Like, that's a little ridiculous.
There's no authority on erratic behavior like Donald Trump.
I mean, come on. And so Brennan has been on the record very critical of Trump. Trump does not like that. Trump also doesn't like the Russia investigation or what anyone, any official person would have to say about supporting the Russia investigation. So it is retaliation, and it's pretty pathetic.
It's obvious that it's retaliation, and that's what people already know. But you have to deny it somehow. So there's a way that they always play it both sides. So along with her statements, there was also a point where she said, well, someone asked her, she goes, including John Brennan, these people were chosen not because they were critics of the president, but also in the statement she went on to say that his clearance was revoked because he's among a group of former officials who have, quote, transitioned into highly partisan people. Which one is it? Is it that they weren't chosen because they were critics of the president, or it's because they've become highly partisan people? Oh, maybe they're too partisan because they're too deferential to the president. Maybe they're too Republican and conservative, because you know how Donald Trump works. He does not like ass kissers. So when somebody is on his side constantly, it's like, you know what, I need to revoke your clearance, because you've become way too partisan.
Yeah, no, it's a great point that those two things are at odds with each other, because obviously he's not getting rid of these people because they're too partisan on behalf of the president. They're too partisan in criticism of many of the president's policies. So, of course, this is the evolution of this executive branch. We saw it under Richard Nixon when the enemies list of Richard Nixon was discovered. In this case, there's an enemies list in plain sight. I mean, this president goes after these people. It's security clearances on one day. It's headlines and tweets on another day. For example, Jeff Bezos, who he became angry with because of Washington Post investigations and Washington Post stories that he felt were highly critical toward his administration. He goes after Jeff Bezos by name and Amazon, talking about them getting a break. So this is all consistent with what is a politicization of the White House. I mean, it's obviously a political post, but the executive branch going after, for political purposes, US citizens is an extraordinary thing.
Right, and you have to consider this in the context of what's been going on with the executive branch throughout Trump's stint as president. He has solidified executive power. He has done things unilaterally. He has pushed for ways to do additional things unilaterally. One of the stories that we reported on last week was how the Trump administration is attempting to pass more policy unilaterally that would give additional tax cuts to big banks. And so they don't want to do that through Congress. And that completely circumvents the checks and balances that we have written in our Constitution. It is part and parcel of what this country is supposed to be about, checks and balances. So look, maybe it's wrong to say this, but John Brennan losing his security clearance, like I care, but it's not the end of the world. He's gonna be all right. But I do think this is a big deal in the grand scheme of things when you take this action into the context of power in the executive branch.
It's a warning shot. It's like, you better not cross me or else I will punish you. Part of the punishment is, as you mentioned, there's reasons that 1.3 million people, by the way, have these security clearances. So these 5 or 6 that he's considered, along with the 3 or 4 that he's already rejected, I'm not sure exactly how much of a dent that is on people who have these security clearances, but it's obvious that this is just a punishable thing. One of the reasons that they have it, again, that you mentioned, was to have other jobs. So now it's gonna be harder for you to get a job in your field because you don't have the access to the information that you need to have to give the appropriate amount of advice or consultation, whatever it is you need to do. So it's punishing you professionally for having a point of view, or at least voicing it to the American people. I mean, it's just that First Amendment thing that you have to talk about.
No, it's such a great point. I mean, Brennan is on the record criticizing Trump multiple occasions. He criticized Trump yesterday after Trump had tweeted about Omarosa being a dog, right? And we have that tweet for you. Let's go to graphic 15. It's astounding how often you fail to live up to a minimum standard of decency and civility. So he goes on, seems like you never understand what it means to be president, nor what it takes to be a good, decent, and honest person. So this is retaliation for criticizing the president. This is what big government is.
Right. This is someone who's outspoken against the executive. But this is an executive abuse of power. And Anna's right to point to the global nature, that is the greater nature of this. Leave aside the Brennan thing. This executive is designating certain institutions, the press, for example, and certain members of the corporate community. I gave you the example of Jeff Bezos, but it goes way beyond that, for retaliation. And he is angered enough to actually try to create certain systems within the executive branch for him to retaliate. That's what's so troubling about this, because he does have a lot of power, and he is able to create these additional institutions within the executive branch. So, and last point, Anna talks about the increased tax cuts, which might come through the executive branch without Congress. Think about this. This Congress pretty much rubber stamps what this guy wants. I mean, they've become sort of this cultish group that supports almost whatever he asks for, I guess, short of the wall funding so far. But having said that, you can't even agree to let them have the last vote on whatever additional tax cuts you want. I mean, it must really be a tough task if you can't even trust it to this Congress. So I think it's also a part of that, trying to increase executive power under his presidency.
Absolutely, and conservatives claim that they were concerned about that under the Obama administration. But of course, that was all, fake concern, because as soon as they have someone like Trump solidifying executive power, increasing executive power, way more than Obama ever did, they don't say anything about it. And I want to give credit to Rich Lowry, who's an editor at National Review. He's a conservative. We disagree on a lot of things. But he is one of the few principled conservatives that I've seen out there who actually does voice his concern about executive power and what the Trump administration is doing. That is not an easy thing to do in today's climate, because in today's climate, if you have the audacity to speak out against Trump as a conservative, they come after you. And he's managed to—
Well, look what they did to Brennan. I mean,
they find a way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a sort of executive branch trolling that's going on that's just insane. I mean, it is a different environment, as you say, Anna.
Yeah,
I mean, it really takes guts to step out at all, especially if you're on the GOP side.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to some other news. Actually, some excellent reporting by TYT Investigates. Following a number of mass school shootings in the United States, lawmakers failed to pass any gun legislation, including reasonable background checks and things that most gun owners actually want. But the Department of Homeland Security is now spending taxpayer money in training programs for children on campuses. They're known as mass casualty events, and they're doing drills for these events, and TYT Investigates poured through documents to give us the details on this. So according to Ken Klippenstein's reporting here, he writes that the DHS has issued a $1.8 million grant in order to create a program providing, quote, life-saving trauma training to high school age students for mass casualty events. So what would they learn during these trainings? Well, the training program, called School-Age Trauma Training, seeks to provide the knowledge necessary to stabilize the injured and control severe bleeding until first responders arrive on scene. So someone gets shot, a student gets shot, teacher gets shot. The students would be trained on what to do in order to care for that person until first responders arrive. So if there's an active shooter on campus, there's chaos, and people understandably want to run from this threat. What do they expect the students to do if there's an active shooter? To stop and help someone who's just been shot and try to prevent them from bleeding out?
Still living in a cartoon world. We're living in a movie where Jean-Claude Van Damme, sorry, I couldn't think of anyone else.
That is a weird.
That is concerning if we're waiting for Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Or who was the other one that's now a Russian citizen?
Oh, Sylvester.
Not Hard to Kill, but there was the other guy. It doesn't matter, all of them.
Okay.
Sylvester
Jason
Stallone.
Statham? No, he's
the one who's now a Russian.
All right,
he used to break people's legs backwards in all his movies.
Oh.
Anyway, so you're waiting for a hero to show up that's gonna stand there when bullets are flying by his head because every bad guy misses and it shoots right by his head. And then some 16-year-old kid in his chemistry class is gonna take a tourniquet and because he's learned all these techniques with this $1.8 million grant, which then will run out and they'll ask for more money from someone else to privately handle this. And he's gonna stick his hand in an open wound, maybe in someone's face, neck, torso, leg, I don't know, maybe blood is shooting everywhere. Their friend is dying. Probably their teacher, maybe someone else who's around in the area, maybe themselves. Because we stay calm when trauma is happening because children have been taught to do this. EMTs are trained to do stuff like this.
Yeah.
And they're professionals, they're adults. And it's what they chose to do, and they're getting paid to do. But now kids, right in the middle of learning about the periodic table, then move on to this training when someone comes in and busts in, because that's the mindset we have in this country now, because we think that's normal.
I know. I think there are a lot of clear-headed Americans who don't think this is normal. I think there are a lot of Americans who see that rather than passing just common sense gun legislation, no one's talking about banning guns. Maybe some people are, but overall, the arguments that I'm hearing from pro-gun control advocates is, hey, why don't we do something to lessen the damage, right? People should have access to guns, but do they need access to high-capacity magazines? Do they need access to certain types of weapons? Shouldn't we do certain types of background checks, mental health care checks, things like that to ensure that the people who have the guns or who are purchasing the guns should have the ability to do so? But anyway, instead of doing that, all of the onus seems to be on potential victims, right? All of the checks, all of the security, all of the, inconveniences falls on to potential victims. So, maybe we need to have metal detectors in schools. Maybe we need to have people take their shoes off before they enter the schools.
Arming teachers.
Arming teachers. So again, all of the onus tends to fall on the victims, potential victims, I should say. And so I don't understand why it needs to be this way. Why can't we have lawmakers who pass common sense gun legislation?
You understand why.
No,
I know
I
it's a rhetorical question, I get it.
I know.
Well, also, and look, this is something that was backed. I'm talking about background checks and even some checks on assault weapons, I'll call them. And I know the purists and the real gun people go, well, there are a lot of assault weapons. They're all kind of, okay, you know what I'm talking, the ones that go da-da-da-da-da-da-da, I'm talking about those. The limits on those and and background checks were supported by a constituency that was the NRA, that was the gun owners. In other words, this is not such an outrageous idea, but gradually they become more dug in on positions that are even against that. So this is a very tough spot. And of course, as JR says, this is a waste of time. I mean, fire drills and showing people how to exit in an emergency, these kids can handle that, and they can also, and they should learn that. But the idea somehow that they're supposed to triage a bunch of fifth graders, some of whom have been shot. First of all, you can do a lot of damage if you do the wrong thing. And secondly, it's a waste of time and money. And then to Anna's point, it does nothing to address the overall problem.
Exactly.
It's amazing. So, okay, so the other part of it, the 1.8 million is eventually gonna go on and run out and they're gonna need more. This is the stalling phase. What happened with the arming the teachers? Maybe I haven't been keeping track of it very closely, but this widespread call to arm teachers and provide them with guns when they don't have supplies, to allow them to be able to shoot whichever students or former students they once taught in the face when they come in with a rifle, shooting at them through doors and through walls. First off, they have to have that. So that, I'm not sure if that policy or that thought process has run out yet, or if we've been delayed long enough to say, oh yeah, I feel better now. It's been several months since those kids got murdered at that last one that I heard about, not about the one that happened last week, by the way. Yeah. But the last one that I heard about, I feel better now. Oh, and I heard we're arming teachers. Okay, moving on. Now the $1.8 million is somehow supposed to pacify us long enough to go, oh, well, the kids are learning how to put tourniquets on and put pressure. Health education and driver's education are part of the things that this policy said it's gonna compare it to. So my kid's gonna turn 16. He's looking forward to driving. Maybe I'll get you a new little Honda. Oh, and at the same time, do your driver education. Hey, Johnny, did you learn how to stop severe bleeding yet in a traumatic situation today? We got to get on that because this is the country we live in.
Well, you know, teachers having rifles or any kind of defensive weaponry has been rejected by most school districts, I think, in most states, or certainly many.
Yeah.
So people, when you really get down to it, understand that more guns in this situation isn't really the solution. Hey, look at Vice President Pence's pep rally that he had a few months ago, where there were no weapons allowed. Here he is speaking to gun owners.
Right.
These are supposed to be the safest people to have guns on earth. And he didn't want a gun in the place.
That's such a great point.
Not one gun.
I mean, but isn't it true of every major political issue? Politicians will build their moats around their person, right? Because they want to insulate themselves from the damage that they're doing to everyone else. Because they want to be completely protected while Americans, deal with the bloodshed, deal with everything that's been going on. And again, look, if you love your guns, if you'd like to shoot for your hobby, if you go hunting, like I get it, okay? I personally don't enjoy shooting guns, but that doesn't matter. If you are a law-abiding citizen, you should have access to guns. The question is, what are we gonna do to rein in what's been going on? This like complete lack of regulation. We need to do something about it. By the way, I wanna give you a few more details about what these DHS documents say, because some of this is insane. So let's go to graphic 4. The training will also include information on how to use one's hands to apply pressure to a wound when nothing else is immediately available. But here's the part that really stood out to me. One passage notes, trainees are expected to, quote, act quickly and decisively in the face of disasters, thereby preventing death and injuries, minimizing loss of property. Now in the article, 2IT Investigates added emphasis to that, and allowing for more rapid and efficient recovery. Okay, so the property part, I mean, wow. Okay, nice to see what your priorities are. So
I don't know the degree to which people directly and personally have to deal with this stuff, but after this happened, this is the letter I got from my kid's school and district that talked about, I'm just going to a couple of aspects of it. Please have an age-appropriate conversation at home with your child or children about appropriate reactions to an active shooter situation. My child is 6 years old. So let's have a conversation about the appropriate actions to have if someone busts into your class.
How's that going to go down?
And then what you should do in those moments. I had to have a conversation with my kid about what happens at the PTA things or the events that happen around school when visitors come on campus and decide to tell them, hey, we're gonna have this thing, or there's like a pie in the face event, and he was worried about it because he didn't like pies in the face. That's the conversation you have with kids at 6-year-old, because you're like, hey, there's no clowns gonna be there, man, I promise. That's the normal conversation you have with kids, but instead you have a conversation about if someone walks in with a gun and what you might have to do in that situation. Also, I'm always at the assembly, because we're in California. A lot of these schools, you have the assembly outside because we're able to do it year-round. And there's perimeters to the school. And the principal said, in a masked way, does anybody, if there's any parents that are here regularly, that are here early enough to watch entrances and exits to the school grounds, let me know, come to the office and volunteer. And it was masked, but everyone knew what she was saying.
Jeez.
And we're like, oh, I'll volunteer to be the first line before my children get killed. If someone decides to break into school before or after, or before school during the assembly, because that's when everybody is together. This is the stuff that every school, no matter what they've been through or have to prepare to be through, have to consider. So my first thought is, yeah, I'd like to watch because I watch people everywhere I go anyway. I was like, I'll be the first line. So I'm volunteering to be this first line of basically a soldier battle to save my child and maybe others. So like we're ready to give up our lives because we're unwilling to do anything about the actual problem we have in the country.
Because the government refuses to do the one thing that the government is supposed to do, and it's to protect its citizens.
So when the kids start seeing adults standing at the edges of the school with their arms crossed, they go, what's going on?
Yeah,
and this is an elementary school. That's what, I mean, I love that you started with the story about your son worrying about the party where he might get a pie in the face, and you end up with this very real, gritty situation. This is an elementary school. We shouldn't be dealing with this kind of thing.
We got to take a break, but when we come back, the story I promised, Elizabeth Warren's bold proposal to rein in some of the corrupt behaviors of corporations in the US. Stick around, we will be right back.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. You're only halfway through, so hold, stay right here. Just want to remind you, if you want to get all 5 segments of the Young Turks commercial free, these are just 2 of them. Every day we do it. So go to tytnetwork.com/join and you get the whole 5 segments, 2 hours, ad free. Do it now.
Welcome back to TYT. All right, I have a lot to get to, so I'm gonna get right to it. A few TYT lives for you. The letter hack says, I'm watching the live show while literally passing kidney stones. That might be TMI, but this is proof that I never missed the Young Turks. You're amazing.
But that pain is now going to be associated with this show and some subconscious level. It may work against us.
All right, Eclectic writes, someone who definitely deserves their security clearance revoked is Donald Trump. How sad is that?
Well, there's some truth to that.
So sad.
There's even talk in the administration that there's certain things that they keep from Trump for just that reason, because he is not. Look, in his first week in office, I think he let something fly about an Israeli contact.
Right.
Remember, to the
That's
Russians.
Right.
So there's some truth to that.
Absolutely. The rest of the tweet says, but I'm not sure it would make any difference. It's not like he ever reads anything anyway, unless it's on Twitter or is 1 page long filled with lots of pretty pictures.
Again.
Yeah.
Hashtag truth.
Yes. All right, and then I want to thank our members. Member shout outs for the day are Juan Oscar Hernandez and Crystal Hesser. Thank you so much for being members. Thank you for supporting our show and keeping us honest. I love it. And by the way, Cenk will be here for the post game, and he specifically called me to tell you guys that he wants to right his wrongs on the post game.
Wow.
Yeah, he has some confessions to make.
That must be a long post game. Oh. He's got a lot of wrongs.
I was like, oh, what did you do? He's like, you'll see. I'm like, okay, wow. I'll let them know. And then finally, it's back to school. All the cool kids want cool threads. And in order to wear cool threads, you need to buy cool threads. You can do that at Shop TYT. In fact, we have a back to school sale, 20% off select items. Just go to shoptyt.com and you can get all those cool, funky shirts.
I like
sweaters.
the long sleeve tee up there, upper right.
That is a cool tee.
Yeah, somebody wants to get me one off of the shoptyt.com for my birthday coming up.
Ooh, when's your birthday?
All right, it's not coming up for a while, but still the point is, it is coming up.
It's coming up.
Pass along your Amazon wish list. We'll be on it.
Okay.
All right, now to the story that I promised. Breaking news story on Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren has proposed new legislation to prove that she wants to go after some of the corporate greed that we're experiencing here in the United States. Now, this legislation is specific, it's very bold, and based on how things are going in Congress and with the executive branch, it's unlikely to pass in any way, shape, or form. However, if the midterm elections go the way that we're hoping they go, there is a possibility. So let me give you the details of her legislation. It's the Accountability Capitalism Act that would redistribute trillions of dollars from rich executives and shareholders to the middle class without costing a dime. So this is not a tax increase proposal, although I'm sure that's something that she's gonna push for as well. It's a little different. So Warren's plan starts from the premise that corporations that claim the legal rights of personhood should be legally required to accept the moral obligations of personhood, right? Corporations are people, my friend, according to Mitt Romney. So if they are people, then they have certain responsibilities and obligations. That's what Elizabeth Warren is arguing. She writes that traditionally corporations sought to succeed in the marketplace, but they also recognize their obligations to employees, customers, and the community. In recent decades, they stopped in favor of a singular devotion to enriching shareholders, and that's what Warren wants to change. So how does she propose to change it? She wants to curb corporations' political activities. And for the biggest corporations, she's proposing a dramatic step that would ensure workers and not just shareholders get a voice on big strategic decisions. So Warren wants to create something known as the Office of United States Corporations, and this would exist inside the Department of Commerce, and it would require any corporation with revenue over $1 billion to obtain a federal charter of corporate citizenship, right? You're a person, you gotta have that corporate citizenship. The charter tells company directors to consider the interests of all relevant stakeholders and shareholders, but also customers, employees, and the communities in which the company operates when making decisions. So in order to achieve that, obviously you gotta like bake in those communities into the business model, right? And so how do you bake that all in? More concretely, the United States corporations would be required to allow their workers to elect 40% of the membership of their board of directors. So in this case, the workers would have much more of a say. They would have more power in the decision making of these corporations. But also limit corporate executives' ability to sell shares of stock. Okay, this is my favorite part. This is my favorite part, guys. So let's go back to that graphic, it's important. So it would ability to share shares of stock that they receive as pay, requiring that such shares be held for at least 5 years after they were received, and at least 3 years after a share buyback. Okay, do you understand what's happening here?
They're going to try to prevent the run-up and the cash in.
What's happening right now, because of the Trump era tax cuts, is these corporations are not reinvesting in their companies. They're not increasing employee pay. A couple of these corporations gave a one-time bonus, right? Just to like hide the fact that they're not really planning on sharing their wealth with their workers. What they really did is they went ahead and bought their stock, right? Stock buybacks. And that artificially inflated the price of these shares.
That's what happened with Apple. They repatriated all that money that's coming back from overseas, $285 billion, and they just put it all into stock buybacks. And that's when you get the headlines, Apple record value.
Exactly. And so what do they do after the stock value goes up? They cash out. Right, so people who think it's a good thing because 401ks increase in value or whatever, no, it's very temporary, because as soon as the value goes up, the executives cash out. Finally, the other proposal is to require corporate political activity to be authorized specifically by both 75% of shareholders and 75% of board members, many of whom would be worker representatives under the full bill.
Yeah, so they're trying to then limit this political activity because it's really, in addition to stock buybacks, there are politician buybacks, and they use a lot of this money to continue to buy off those politicians. It's a corrupt system, we know it, and I love the fact that Elizabeth Warren is working on the Supreme Court decision to consider corporations people,
right.
And as a result, there's corporate citizenry that is responsible as a person in other ways besides just being able to wash out our political system with money.
Yeah.
So it's a terrific twist. As you say, Anna, it will go nowhere given the current configuration of the Congress, but it's out there, and I like that it's on the board. And as you also have mentioned, as Congress perhaps changes in character politically, maybe something happens on it.
They have to answer to this now.
Yes.
So there's these things that we allow our corporations to do based off of our worship and culture of them. So they're rich. Man, what do you want to do? Everyone deserves the right to be rich. Why are you hating on the rich? Don't you want to be rich too? That pacifies or actually shuts down everyone else that thinks, hey, why am I getting everything stolen from me to give to you?
Right.
The reverse is always the thought process. Hey, how dare these corporations have to give something to you that you earned, by the way, and the government to give to you what you earned. It's not a giveaway. We all pay into it, number one. And the other parts are given away. So the narrative has to change, and maybe this is the beginning of it. But general politicians have dug in so deep with supporting corporations to this point. The genius part of this is she's using some of those terms, like you said, the citizenry being if you're a personhood, if you're part of the personhood of the country, you have to act like it then.
Right.
So that's something they went with already. So now you have to use that against them. And also, how are we gonna pay for all this? Mm-hmm. Oh, we're gonna pay, it doesn't cost us anything.
Yes.
It's disarming both of those empty threats all the time in the first place anyway. So what else can you do? And as you said, it's not gonna go through necessarily, Mark, but at least we can make people who aren't gonna be for it answer to it and be on record.
Right, that's a great point. That let's start to hold the GOP, and by the way, we say the GOP, also the Democrats.
Yes.
Democrats are very much in the pocket of corporate America. We were no fans of the Obama administration on Wall Street and all the rest, so we're just not flag wavers for the left as personified by the Democrats. I mean, they're not even so left on so many issues. But having said that, I do think that this could make people account for where they stand on these corporate issues. Make them stand up and vote on it.
Absolutely, and what I love about Warren is that she has been so consistent on economic policies. and really holding corporate America's feet to the fire. One of my favorite videos features her questioning Mick Mulvaney and his views on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We gave you a little taste of that video on yesterday's show, but if you have time, please take a look at the full context of that conversation, that back and forth, because she's a fighter when it comes to corporate America. And that is a ballsy thing to do considering how powerful corporations are in this whole political discourse.
Right, she risks a lot. And she's a fighter who knows her stuff. She knows the X's and O's of the economy so well that she can go toe-to-toe to defend the Consumer Protection Bureau. And as a consumer advocate, she really knows that territory. So I think she comes at it, armed with not only a sense of the fight, but a sense of the facts.
That's the last part of it. Has to be transitioned is the layman's terms of these things, because they already have the the elitists and they're talking about their financial institutions and how they're going to do this. But so when she puts it in all these terms, most folks can't understand how it works. So then they'll look and go, oh, well, it's too hard for me to understand. I'll go with the dumb version that they're telling me what's happening rather than me knowing what's happening. This is pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Most people can understand how this works, and I think, I don't know, she's speaking all those financial terms. I don't have any money. I don't need equity or anything. What does all this mean? I'll move on. I'll just listen to what they tell me is happening with my money and with my life.
And to get a populist wave, to get a popular support for anything, you do need to explain it in ways that people can understand. I mean, I think JR makes a very important point here, which is, they sell as, hey, it's a middle class tax cut. It's a middle class tax cut. You hear that over and over and over again, and then people just blindly repeat and parrot what they hear. It's a middle class tax cut when it's actually a corporate tax cut for the uber rich in America. This is could get popular support because it's a corporate responsibility bill. It's corporate personhood, just like they're people in this one way. We've already seen the Supreme Court decision on this. They now are people in another way with corporate responsibility. I think it's very easy to understand and to develop popular support behind.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to some other news. Earlier this week, Donald Trump had a huge signing event to show his support for the National Defense Reauthorization Act. And in that act, as we all know, he increased the budget for the military to $717 billion in fiscal year 2019. And there were a few good things in that bill. One of the good things was the fact that he would increase pay for the military. That was pretty much the only good thing. But there was also something that caught my attention, and I was curious to see how Trump would react to it in coming days. So part of this Reauthorization Act included specific provisions pertaining to Russia. Provisions that I felt Trump wouldn't be in favor of, but he hadn't said anything about it when we reported the story. He said some stuff about it today. Not today, but recently, and I wanted to share that aspect with you guys. So in the signing event, Trump objected to 4 of the 8 provisions related to Russia. Included in the 4 is provision 1241, which states that none of the defense bill's funds, quote, may be obligated or expended to implement any activity that recognizes the sovereignty of the Russian Federation over Crimea. Now, in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, which was Ukrainian territory, and the US imposed sanctions on Russia as a result of that. Russia not in favor of those sanctions, clearly not in favor of them. And so the whole point here is, hey, we're not going to use any of the defense budget on protecting Russia and its actions. And Trump does not like that. So Trump argued that the bill would unjustly limit his presidential authority by restricting military-to-military cooperation with Russia and mandating he report to Congress if Russia violates the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty or if he discusses a new strategic arms reduction treaty with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So he's already, spoken out against this. He's on the record. It's unsurprising to me. What was surprising was when he initially signed it and we hadn't heard anything about him being against these Russian provisions.
This stuff, this bill, this defense bill has other stuff in it. It has stuff like American troops in South Korea, for example, and the number of troops associated with Middle Eastern involvement. In other words, there are a number of things laid out here. So it is weird. I mean, yet again, another weird Russian thing that's carved out by Trump. And it's, again, carved out so obviously. It was kind of like his clunky remarks in front of Putin at that press conference. It's like, I can't believe this. Like, if you're really in Russia's pocket, why wouldn't you at least try to put on a little bit of a charade? Well, in this case, where probably a little less of a charade is possible. I mean, you are going to have to go on the record with actual legislation, actual spending. He's had to come out of the woods even further and say, right. I'm not good with this Russia part.
I think one of the parts that stuck out, I think I mentioned this a few times today, there was aspects of it that these would violate some of Trump's presidential powers, one of which being they were requiring him to report on North Korea's nuclear activities. So I looked at the signing statement that was brought up, and again, in more of the terms, says, my administration will treat these provisions consistent with the president's constitutional authority to withhold information, the disclosure of which could impair national security. So in speaking to the Congress, it's going to impair your national security to continue your buddy-buddy relationship with your new friend who's amazingly smart and is tough in the way that you wish you could be at such a young age. So it's going to impair national security for people to have an update on what you promised would happen because of your summit that was self-aggrandizing?
Yeah, so let me give you the exact wording. So here are bullet points of all the things that Trump objects to. So we haven't even talked about this yet, provisions limiting US support for the Saudi military campaign in Yemen. So US taxpayer money is going toward fighting Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, okay? Yeah. That's what's happening. And there is a humanitarian crisis there. There is children are dying as a result of our actions. We're selling arms to Saudi Arabia like crazy. But no one reports on it, no one talks about it. It drives me nuts. Okay, so Trump is against that. He doesn't want any limitations when it comes to helping Saudi Arabia, go after Yemeni citizens the way that they have, civilians the way that they have. Transfers of Guantanamo Bay detainees and the number of troops in South Korea. And then finally, this is what you were alluding to, JR, provision mandating the president report on North Korea's nuclear activities. You know why Trump doesn't want to report on what's going on with North Korea's nuclear activities? Because they're still developing nuclear weapons. After he tweeted that we have nothing to worry about.
Show's over. Right.
Yeah. No, there's been complete nuclear disarmament. No, there hasn't. No, there hasn't. You're not a good negotiator. You didn't make a good deal. You didn't make a deal. You didn't do anything. And he's trying to make it seem as though he accomplished something.
Right. I mean, he's a headline stealer, but he doesn't really do anything. And then you see who he's in bed with. You see that he's in bed with the Saudis. That's because of military sales to Saudi Arabia. It's all about money. And Russia, that part's about money also, as you know. It's either about money laundering or it's about money loans, about money loaned. It's about his Trump properties. It's about any number of things that are associated with money in the main. He doesn't want any limit on his executive power. And as we said earlier, he's trying to expand his executive power. And this clearly places limits on his executive power and forces him to own up to certain things that are going on in his administration.
And he hates it. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, Alex Jones is at it again. So I'm going to enjoy that conversation. Stick around.
Thanks for watching what I hope was a lovely edition of the Young Turks. Now, you know that is 2 of the 5 segments that we do because that's free. We want to have you support independent media and come watch the whole show that we do every day. That's 5 segments overall, no ads at all. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Come become a member. Thanks for watching either way.